What's up, Blue Grit Nation? Thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. Today, we're going to talk about a pretty simple prompt, but a large conversation. I put a pretty simple prompt out on my Instagram, Blue Grit Wellness, and all I asked was, what would a police department need to do to show that they care about officer wellness? We hear it being discussed a lot more, certainly a lot more now than I did early in my career, roughly 15 years ago. And I know that even then it was a higher discussion or a more frequent discussion than generations past. I think that first responder world is getting a lot better. We're definitely seeing it, but we still have a long ways to go. There's a lot of conversation and a lot of money in wellness right now. So there's the good, the bad, the in-between, the ugly. But just the fact that it's a more prevalent conversation means that we're making a lot of headway. So when I ask that, it comes from a question and a conversation of what can be done, not simply what could be said, but really what could be showed by an agency, by an organization, because you can talk the talk, but it doesn't really matter until you walk the walk. And so my prompt to you all, followers and the Blue Grit community, is how do you best show it? You can have programs, you can offer resources, but my wonder and my observation is unless you actually support it officially, unofficially, formally, informally, then it can be all for naught. You can say all these things about wellness, but unless you demonstrate a culture of wellness, and that goes all the way up the chain, right? That goes from the top administrators, if you're in, regardless what format of government you're in, it goes into, let's say, the city officials or state officials or county officials, more than what is said in policy, more than what is said in an employee brochure, but really system of practices, and like I said, the culture, just the dynamics where officer wellness is supported. So to give you an example, I know departments and I know individual units and teams and people on those that are allowed to work out on duty. And as a crew, the majority of them can make it happen. They can decide to make it happen. They can encourage those others. It becomes the norm to do it. It becomes abnormal to abstain. And so no one's going to be picking a bone with any of those officers that are working out, within reason, if nothing crazy is going on. They manage their time. They split the work. They triage, and then they take breaks, and so they cycle through, and they make it work. Conversely, at the same department, you can have officers that want to work out on duty, but if the culture of that crew, which is led largely by the supervisor, it's usually going to be a sergeant, right? First line supervisor, is to get out there and just shag calls no matter what the exigency is, then those couple minority officers would clearly feel very uncomfortable working on duty. They might feel that they technically can, but logistically can't, especially if they're more junior officers that might not have the confidence. So you can have a greenlit practice to work out on duty, but very quickly, just by not supporting it, not by demonstrating the value of it, you can quickly make it obsolete as far as a practice. So it really is incumbent on every layer of the organization. That's from the officer, ground level, boots on the ground layer, to build that informal support, to build that normalcy. I think neither are words, but you get what I'm saying. And that's going to have to go all the way up the chain to agency administrators, the top dog or dogs. It's also going to have to potentially involve city or other government officials, right? They might be the ones saying that they want it, but unless they're checking back in, and this comes down to accountability, but just making sure it's happening and figuring out if it's not happening, why is that, right? Is it that informal norm that's just, it's hard to adjust? Are you getting pushback from one of the levels? Is it getting rewarded? Is it getting punished, right? I mean, there's units where you might have a few people with very flexible time, let's say, off of the street, which might have the same green light to work out on duty, the same vocal support from certain aspects, maybe the top of the chain. But if you have your direct supervisor making passive-aggressive comments or praising up directly or indirectly those that aren't working out on duty, then what do you have, right? You're not going to generate that kind of response appropriately. Because we know, the private sector knows, general population knows that people that move, they're active, they work out, not only are they happier, but they're more productive employees, right? The science is there, the studies are there, the common sense is there. But at the same time, you still have a lot of this old school, hey, we just grind, we don't have time for that. You do it on your own time, or actually you don't even do it. And it's almost like this badge of honor to not step away from the work at times. And I will throw in that I've had my own stints of that. Yes, being active is a priority in my life. At least it has been for, the majority of my police career. And I'm glad for that habit of instilling those reps that it feels weird not to do something active. But it doesn't mean I haven't struggled with peaks of unhealthy work-life balance. It doesn't mean I haven't struggled with that workaholic nature, that perfectionist nature where when I'm at work, I just want to be as productive as possible. I'm not trying to toot my horn. I'm saying that's not a good thing. So that's something that I've actually personally been reflecting on a lot in the last month or so, just with how much has been put on my plate. So I am challenging myself publicly. I'm inviting you to join me in reflecting on your work-life balance, your level of wellness, and that goes beyond physical activity. That's certainly a huge pillar. If you've been following me for a bit, you know that I recognize all the intertwining and affecting of every different pillar of health, whether it's nutrition, sleep, relational, I want to say dynamics. And that's your family, your romantic partner, that's your friends. All your social circles, and on, right? So it's one piece of it, but take a look, examine, and engage those around you to help you examine that, and then challenge yourself to get better. Challenge yourself to build better boundaries. Challenge yourself to inject some better practices in your life as when it comes to work. And maybe that's literally stepping away from the desk every 15 to 30 minutes to go talk to someone in your team, right? We don't get a lot of face-to-face, especially those of us at desks, especially with people that maybe outside of first responder world that work remote. So yeah, take a look at your day-to-day and see what you can do about improving it by these tiny, tiny little markers. All right, so let's get back to the prompt. I put it on Instagram, and I had a lot of really good engagement. So I just kind of want to go through it a little bit and share that with you for those that aren't reading all the comments, and very relevant to this conversation. So first off, all right, so Majestic said, you have to start out with actually caring, no matter what it looks like to you, actually giving is this a family podcast? I'm just going to say the S word. Because I don't want to check the box that this has explicit material in it. But yeah, it talks about how it doesn't matter what programs you have. You need to have that servant leadership. You need to take care of those that work for you consistently and genuinely to keep morale high. Mandatory fitness, part of the job. Forced PT. I think you'll have a lot of people following along with this and listening in that'll be a big fan of that. There's definitely a part of me that thinks that there should be some element of forced exercise, forced activity. I might be a little bit more cautious about how that would be implemented. I think tone and delivery is huge in how someone will receive something. But I think baby steps, right? There's no doubt that this is a physical job, potentially. And if it's patrol, absolutely 100%. But, detectives have to slap cuffs on people sometimes too, right? So we do a test to come in, we get a physical to come in, but I know there's a lot of places, certainly Washington State, where unless you're on a specific specialty role like a SWAT team that's no doubt super high speed, where you have to test again and keep up certain physical standards, then there really is no physical standard check-in. And that surprises a lot of people. That surprised me, coming into police work. And there was no continued kind of physical. And that's a big deal. I mean, cardiac issues are the biggest killer in first responder world. And essentially you have people living these extremely unhealthy lives with long shifts, poor sleep, poor diet, low movement, and the stress, right? And you're gonna put that all in a little package and start to shake that thing and heat it up. I mean, it's a pressure cooker, time bomb waiting to happen for a lot of us. And I think a lot of us that have been in the industry, unfortunately, because we do build this community, unfortunately, we do get close and we know of people. We have friends that do die, from these medical conditions. It might be kind of innocuous, like not even like right after a struggle or right after a foot pursuit, but a lot of times it can be the time following. From a doctor's presentation I heard recently on officer wellness and first responder wellness, a lot of times it can just be midday. A lot of times it can be right after retirement, and I'm talking about a year, a couple years. The average police officer will draw 18 months of their pension. So let me say that again. The average officer will draw 18 months, 1 year and a half of their pension nationally. So you put that along with the stat where the average police officer dies at, is it 57, I just heard? I heard from two sources in the last 3 weeks. And it's very much on par with what I've heard before, but you hear these things and you get reminded of these things. They become front of mind, hopefully. But, we're all grinding, guys. We're all guys and gals. We're grinding for this 20, 25, 30-year career, and we sacrifice a lot, and we focus on that pension, thinking that it's like our golden ticket into relaxation, into, the promised land, that, that decompression we finally need. And guess what? If we don't take care of ourselves, we're going to croak without using any of our pension. And that's a win for the governments that aren't paying out, right? So in a semi-joking but really serious note, it's like, no, like, you worked your career, draw your pension, draw it for 15, 20, 25 years. Like, let's make that the norm, all right? So it's one thing at a time, nice and slow. So like Majestic said, you just got to care. And it's crazy simple, but I mean, whether it's this topic or many, if everyone just cared, like genuinely, not even a ton, but just genuinely a bit, then we wouldn't have to have these conversations, right? You wouldn't have to be listening to me. I wouldn't have to be recording. It'd be great. It's just officer wellness, checkbox, done. Shut it down. And that's not a bad thing, if we didn't have to talk about it because it was so normal that it was just known and accepted, right? All right. So Austin said, for him, peer support shows a lot, right? The programs. So officers and deputies have someone to talk to when they're going through a difficult time. and that being extremely important. Yes, so I am a huge fan of peer support. Many of you will know, as I talk about it and write about it, that I've been a long-term member of my agency's peer support team. I'm a peer support coordinator currently, and it makes all the difference. We all are social creatures. We all like to talk, well, some more than others, maybe myself more than others, but we like to talk about our shared experience. And it can be a huge hurdle. It can be a huge obstacle to go outside of our friend group or our peers, those we work along, those we trust, like a counselor or therapist. Quick shout out for counselors and therapists. Please get outside your comfort zone and check it out. I am. So let's destigmatize that too. But yeah, peer support can be the first level, right? And a lot of us aren't trained professionals. Most of us are not, certainly clinically professionals. But we have some basic training, and hopefully your program has some basic training. And hopefully the program highlights confidentiality more than anything. But then once you have that trust, let's go. Let's just talk about it. Explain what you're going through. Just talk through your experience, and that's highly therapeutic. That provides a huge level of healing and understanding and processing. So if y'all don't have a peer support program, start looking that up. There's a lot of good free resources online. The IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, puts out like a template for building wellness programs like peer support. So check it out. My Arena says, zero tolerance on subculture that does not support seeking help. Define critical incident flags, flags that pop, then action and services begin. Training services provided to families on mental health. Yeah, so let me rewind a little bit. So what he's saying is that we cannot accept any cultures that are not conducive towards seeking help, that don't support it. That's absolutely true, right? So you can rewind back to my example about doing physical activity on duty, right? So you can have anyone throw that off at any level, right? So it could be peers just in the break room, right? Just saying, man, I can't believe that people would go, out on a claim. I can't believe that people can't just handle their stuff. What a bunch of weaklings, right? That kind of mentality. We cannot tolerate it. And we certainly can't tolerate it at any level. And then what he's talking about is certain things would trigger certain actions and services, right? So a lot of agencies, and forgive me for keeping the police lane, that's what I know, but a lot of agencies will automatically have certain practices, right, for an officer-involved shooting. But that's a pretty significant one, pretty low frequency for most people. Most people go through their careers without having one. But it triggers certain things where you're going to be, on administrative leave. You're going to take a break off the street. Largely, you'll go talk to a mental health professional. But we could make it a lot more than just that. I think a lot of seasoned officers recognize, especially if they have been in a critical incident to the level of or to include an officer-involved shooting, those aren't the calls that really mess with you the most. And I can speak from my own experience. My officer-involved shooting certainly was not the most taxing call on my stress levels or my day-to-day life. I mean, it was a big deal. Don't get me wrong, because it was a pretty close call. And it was very formative to how I perceive and how I navigate my career and my whole life now. But there's a lot of calls that really wear on me more. So I think it's a meaningful conversation to have when you talk about different practices that can be built in to your systems and your organizational systems. Family, right? Talking about family for mental health. You can have officers, firefighters sitting in their mandatory training once a year or once every few years. Talk about all the emotional roller coasters and the stress roller coaster, Dr. Kevin Gilmartin, all that good stuff. But a lot of times your family, your spouses, your significant others your teenage kids have never heard of the concepts unless you've actually told them. So they don't have that layer of understanding that helps you be a more happy, healthy, functional family unit. So let's not ignore the families. I mean, there's no successful first responder without a successful family behind them and alongside them, truly. Aaron says to hire him as a trainer, which is a very valid comment. If you scroll in my comments and check out Aaron Danger, he's a neighbor. He's a fellow South King County dude, and he's a legit strength athlete. So it's super impressive. Check him out if you want to get into strength sports. He might be an amazing resource, and he might take on some clients. All right, Chemtrail says full family support, including financial. Yeah, so I love that more wellness training is incorporating financial aspects, talking about budgeting. Man, we got to talk about budgeting, right? Like, we as a nation, we know our overspending, our credit issues are off the hook. So of course it's going to affect officers, firefighters just being normal people, right? Or just the fact that you take a normal person and then you work them up a lot. I meant hours, but I guess that could mean more than one thing. But then you make them super stressed, and then you leave them with this overtime money, right? And how is it not tempting to buy toys you can't afford, cars you can't afford, trucks, houses you can't afford, vacations you can't afford, right? On and on and on. That retail therapy hits us hard in a much easier way than ever with these online retailers. I can certainly find myself buying some stuff I don't need. So let's have those conversations. So people are set up for success. They're not working as a means to keep up their lifestyle that they can't afford. And that's a big deal. We got SRT Obsession, leadership that stands behind their deputies, not just lip service. All right, no mandatory overtime, available to therapy 24/7. You won't hear any pushback from me. It goes back to that couple things: the healthy work-life balance, and also access to resources, but the actual support and fostering of using those resources, right? Destigmatizing them, advertising them. One thing that I really love about my agency and what we're doing well in wellness, and we do have a lot of work to do, don't get me wrong, but is peer support is not a weird thing to hear in the hallways. It's not a weird thing to hear in the briefing room, whether it's peer support people or not. It's very common just to talk about it as a concept because it's been socialized, because it's been shown and implemented and experimented by different officers, and they see the value, they give the buy-in, and they continue to practice that. So it can be slow going, but you can get there despite where your organization is at. Drew.0 says, I think physical fitness helps a ton. I agree. Feeling good about yourself translates to our attitudes. Yeah, it goes back to that. Goes back to those studies, right? You can be fit and active. You can feel good, look good, perform well, optimize, right? And that's something that every first responder should be wanting. Not feeling policed by your fellow officers or incentivizing finding dirt. Man, we're going somewhere else now. That's a very fair point, though. You can have that kind of toxic culture, which we're familiar with, and you're talking about not feeling safe. I mean, you're kind of being ratted out. We are in this world of accountability, which is an amazing thing. Like, we need good police accountability. There's nothing that pisses off cops more than cops that are doing terrible, heinous stuff. A lot that pops up on the news. It frustrates us. It gets our blood boiling more than anyone. But truly, yeah, like, if you feel like you're just going to get nitpicked for the little things, that's not safe, right? That's not a safe environment. You don't feel at ease. There's no psychological safety. And that can be a big deal when you're in this job, this career where you need to be able to trust the people alongside you. And that can be a matter of life and death. That can be a matter of survival. So, absolutely. Jeff says, combining brain strength and development with a physical fitness program. I like that. So, strong brains mean better management of stress, more resistant to injury, heal faster. Yeah, so that's something that we don't talk about a lot. We'd like to talk about things we can see, like physical health, nutrition. We can see the things that we're eating, but those things can definitely contribute towards strong cognitive abilities. There's studies on that. But then there's also just a lot of things you can do to build up your mental abilities, right? Challenge yourself cognitively, learn new things, keep sharp. There's a lot of elderly people that like doing things like Sudoku and crosswords because it keeps their brain working. And so there's some credence to that, even for those of us that aren't in the nursing home yet, right? Okay, Danielle says mandatory physical fitness, mandatory mental health work, like therapy. Yeah, so we're hitting on a lot of the same things. You guys are on the same page. Very good insights. Big Nada. Command staff that actually practices leadership instead of management. Stop focusing on nonsense like cruiser inspection sheets and other useless paperwork. Try to reduce and streamline paperwork. Those are examples. They're necessary, but there's probably better and worse ways to go about it, right? You need to make sure, as a supervisor, I'll say, you need to make sure your officers have stuff in their cars that they need. If you don't regularly check in some way, if you don't provide some sort of practice to that, then you're going to have officers without half the stuff they need, right? But there are better and worse ways to do that, and not make that the highest focus or priority of the job, certainly. But what you're talking about is kind of organizational stress, or as some people would label it, it's just it's the everyday little things, right? It's reports getting kicked back. Sorry for those guys and gals that worked for me. I did kick back a lot of reports. But you have a lot of things coming in different ends, right? Your evidence wasn't logged properly. You didn't get this online training module done in time, or you have 2 days to complete this research, or you have to go back to the all-day in-person training. Like, these things can be tedious, but they can really add up to be a lot of things in addition just to the everyday stress of life and the everyday stress of your actually stressful calls, when these little things are kind of buzzing in your ear and popping off on your Outlook. So, yeah, it's a real thing. It does affect a lot of people, and everyone has a different modality of stress that can affect them more than others. Big Nada goes on to prop up peer support, talking about how it's a lot more trusted than just going to a shrink, right? And I do want to say, again, if you're thinking about it, or even if you're not thinking about it, start thinking about it. Therapists, mental health professionals, counselors, they are the professionals, right? So I know everyone has a different thing. Some people it might be their clergy, some people it might be a family member, but just realize that if you're not getting the results you feel like are aiding you, then consider it. Challenge yourself. And if you had one experience and it was terrible, just realize it's just like a physician, just like your family doc. If you had a terrible experience with your family doc, there are certainly a ton of other family docs you can go to. I've done that. I've found doctors that I like as opposed to my doctor I didn't like. I've done that with dentists, literally in the same clinic. I'm like, not into that guy. He's kind of an a-hole. I'm going to talk to this gal instead. All right, enough with that. He goes on to talk about fitness and bringing up the Cooper standard, really kind of drawing at the point that it's not functional. And so I'll agree with that, right? Cooper test is that standard test that we do, or we used to do in Washington State, but most areas of the nation do. Just push-ups, sit-ups, mile and a half run, 300-meter sprint. Whether that's really functional and whether that's really applicable, and I've talked on this before, definitely written about it, but I don't think it is. That's why I definitely, when coaching people or talking to people about passing the physical, I'm like, yeah, just pass the physical. But if that's your giant hurdle, I mean, you still have a long way to go. And what I mean long way, it's not to disparage you or put you down. I'm just saying, no, for your career, you got to think about just functional strength and conditioning movements that are going to help you be durable, help you build cardio, not just like running on a track for a mile and a half, but truly like have that quick rise and in your physical output and be able to recover quickly, right? Things like sprints and dynamic work. So good point. Yeah, just talking about what fitness really means and what that really can look like. All right, we got a lot more positives for peer support. Got another talking about working on a duty, so we covered that. You guys are all on the same pages. Mental health. Deer Hollow visited the PD, talked about their streamlined program, yearly check. So I've heard presentations from Deer Hollow. They're an inpatient clinic. I know they offer other resources and trainings. I'm very intrigued. I've actually been really excited to hear more about them and learn more about what they could potentially do for my team. So yeah, whether it's Deer Hollow, First Responder Wellness, both organizations that I've been hearing a lot and meeting with recently. Very excited, that we have those kinds of resources available to help officers that are going through a lot. Diane says, practicing what you preach. So much is caught versus taught. So there's a lot to be said about agencies that go beyond what's required and their responsibility to ensure wellness of officers and their families. So yes, absolutely. Diane's right on the money there. Families are the backbone. So, like I said, there's no successful first responder without a successful family and relationships behind them. Tango says, in-house support service would be ideal, like a therapist on call. Yeah, I'm totally down for that. We've experimented and have been building programs where we had a mental health professional that the officers and staff are familiar with. This started with kind of in-person debriefs, and then it shifted to mental health visits, like wellness visits, where quarterly you can tune in anonymously, remotely on the department dime, and just kind of do that touch base. So I love that more and more of this. Operation Trauma Recovery, Protocol for Resilience, Immediate Crisis Intervention, Scheduled Follow-up. Yes, absolutely. So a lot of that can be debriefs, like stress debriefs or CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management, as those in the industry may be more familiar with that term. Also diffusings, right? So it doesn't have to be a full-on debrief. It can just literally be, a peer support person or just otherwise just an informal leader or a formal leader. After a call, just kind of getting everyone back together. We do a lot of after action for tactics and procedure, but just to get everyone together, kind of check in and just be like, hey man, that was a really tough call. That can go a huge, long way, right? Especially if there's younger people there they just need a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of validation that like, yeah, okay, that bothered Sarge too. This is normal to feel off. It's normal to kind of be frustrated with your feelings or have to sift through them and sort through them. That can be huge for someone's career development and their own mental health awareness and support. I'm going to try to move a little faster because I've still got a couple and I've been rambling as I do, but that's kind of the point. So show up, take time. Yeah, absolutely. Be available, be present. Peer support mental health, cover those. Access is a big theme, right? Resiliency programs, check-ins, fitness incentives. Yeah, so what that looks like, whether it's through your organization, whether it's through your department, but it's basic, right? It's common sense. We want to incentivize what we want to see. So absolutely. RM20 says it's not just officer wellness, it's employee wellness, right? So we're talking about administration, dispatch. Absolutely. Yeah, dispatch is the most forgotten branch of first responder world. So absolutely. Let's include them in the mix. Let's make sure that
our programs and our resources are available and advertised to them. And there definitely are some dispatch that operate alongside or even embedded in an organization, public safety organizations, and then there's also those that are private contract. So hopefully those private companies are doing a lot as well. But I can speak from my own experience that a lot of our larger scale incidents, when we do debriefs, we do try to schedule. I mean, scheduling is a nightmare always with all these shift workers, days on and off and all that. But the larger ones, we have made a habit to reach out to our fire component, our fire partners, and then our dispatch as well, because it definitely affects them. And they, not to go too far down that road, but they can't see what you're seeing, and so their imaginations are often left to visualize the worst. And so it's a critical need for them to get that support as well. All right, the last comment I'm going to say is from Jason. Peers and supervisors who seek to understand before judgment. Okay, so we're just talking about, let's just go to empathy, right? It's I've spoken on this before, but probably the most valuable trait that you can have as a first responder is just empathy. You're just giving a damn, right? That's not explicit, right? I don't think it is. Speak positively. Okay, leadership that speaks about their experience with therapy. Okay, so that just goes with normalizing it again, right? So if you have leaders, if you have prominent people in prominent positions of influence that say that they've gone to therapy, that's huge. That really enables and supports and fosters that that destigmatization for your younger generations. And so that's a lot of why I started doing what I've been doing publicly, as far as the social media, as far as this podcast, as far as me even saying in this episode, yeah, I've gone to therapy and I've gone on and off. It's something that I've put off for a long time. The death of my friend at work is what prompted me to go at the behest of friends. But man, I really could have benefited from going many years before that. I think that if officers, firefighters, dispatchers, corrections, if you all are open to just kind of making it part of your practice, just treat it like a physical, right? We should be going to physicals once a year, at least. Okay, so at least chew on it, right? Think about it and recognize that there's a lot of seasoned officers, firefighters, COs that will publicly say, whether it's on social or in your own circles, hopefully, that they wish that they found this a lot earlier in their career. They wish that they went to the debriefs, or that they even had debriefs earlier in their career. So just pay credence to that and think about what you can do to prevent, be proactive about a lot of these health aspects in your own life. So to wrap it all up, the followers, you all have a lot of really good insights and input. There was a lot of overlap, which shows that we're thinking about the same things, right? We're recognizing what would help us, what would help our agencies and our team. So I'm a Jocko fan, and it talks about ownership, a lot of his content. So I challenge you to take on what you can for your ownership. You don't have to be a supervisor. You don't have to be a peer support person, but there is a certain degree where you can take on your own actions and influence your culture in a positive direction based on what you care about in the vein of wellness, based on what you think would help your organization culture and morale. Certainly, there's a lot you could do in your day-to-day to affect that and to elevate it. However, my caveat, and he does talk about this too in some of his podcasts, but beware of over-ownership. Taking extreme ownership is great, but there is a line. There is a point too far. If you think, whether you are a peer support coordinator or the commander of wellness or the chief or
an officer, there is a point we have to recognize that you do not own the whole problem. Your whole organization owns the whole problem, but there's certainly a lot that you can do. There's a lot that you can socialize with your circle. Start there and start making a plan and building that forward. So, thank you very much for tuning in and listening. Thank you to those that were commenting and sharing their insights, sharing their experiences, their frustrations, what they've seen that works well. I mean, this is a community, truly. And the more we can share and lean on each other, the more we can get accomplished, and the further we can go, and the better we can be. Take care.